Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the City of Farmers Branch Study Session meeting. It is Tuesday, July 19th, 2022. The time is 3 p.m. Unfortunately, Councilmember Driscoll will not be here this evening. He got what people are referring to as COVID and will not be able to attend tonight. We wish him a speedy recovery and hope he's doing well. But with that, we'll jump into A1, discuss regular agenda items. Councilmember Roman.
Thank you, Mayor. So I had some questions about item I1 and I guess kind of I2 and I3. It looks like the contracts that we have are in their draft form, so I didn't know if we were going to at some point have a more completed version to review. I had some concerns about some of the language in there as well as some punctuation and missing words.
Yeah, on I-1, or was it the?
Well, I1, and it looks like it's in the draft form for the other ones as well, I think. Let's see, I3.
I think I-3 may have just walked in.
Yeah,
That would be Ms. Cook.
Oh,
I mean, I can tell you the status on I-2 and I-3.
Sure.
I'd say the vast majority of in fact, I'd say pretty much all of the major terms to the agreements are negotiated or agreed to, at least in discussions between staff and representatives of the STARS. We're largely at this point, I know we've got one area regarding some language on the rent provision in the new lease for the volleyball basketball center I think we just have to, I think we've agreed to it between discussion with the staff and the STARS representatives. We just haven't had a chance to finalize the actual language to conform to that. The rest of it's largely a lot of just cleanup from taking, still from going back from the original 2004 lease. And frankly, it's just been taking a lot of time to get all that done. Mm-hmm. But I feel pretty confident we're, given another probably 3 business days, we could have both agreements in signature form ready to go. So what you'll see tonight in the form of discussion presentation should be, unless staff tells me otherwise, I believe is in substantial agreed form between the parties.
okay. Now, I did notice that the main deal points are agreed upon, and it did mention that there were some minor items that are still being negotiated. Can you kind of give me an example of what those are?
Every page of formatting Kevin has rewritten.
Well, setting aside formatting.
Okay. I guess nothing is really minor. So who's paying the rent and who's paying for maintenance and all the big things are decided upon. But there's 1,000 other minutia items such as start date, completion date, and other things like that. So all the minor items, I would say, have been negotiated as well. But we have a lot of cleanup of language and whatnot. So tonight I'll present to you what has changed from Friday and whatnot, so you'll get to see more of the details with copies of the red lines. But I would say pretty much everything is finalized and negotiated. So.
Okay. I just feel a little uncomfortable moving forward with approving something that's in its draft form.
Yes.
Is my only thing.
Yes, I understand.
I'm very excited about the project, and I wanted to move forward just as much as everybody else. I just want to make sure that we have the final version.
Yeah, I do too.
Councilmember, I'll
That's our hope
tell you
too.
from the city attorney standpoint, from my personal standpoint, it's kind of like I've just been negotiating a purchase on the sale of a house, and I'm usually take the attitude it's not done till it's signed or it's not sold till it's closed, and I appreciate that. However, I typically will also say if it's really mostly cleanup, that's kind of my stance. It's really is mostly cleanup as long as we are in major terms have always pretty much been negotiated between staff and the STAR. So I feel pretty good about this one.
I understand,
And I-
but I don't.
But I understand your
Yeah.
position too. I've been there.
I will tell you, there's nothing like a deadline to get a deal done. And we have nonstop been working. The president and CEO of the Stars, Brad Albert, will be here tonight at 6. And will stand before you and say, I am signing this agreement. There are, I guess the big issue, we're not 100% confident that the facility is going to be open in August. We're having a little extra hoop that we're going to have to jump through on the construction part of that. And the way the original lease was written is they weren't paying rent until there was a CO. Well, we can't be in a position where we owe debt without their money, because we are not ever going to be in the rears or paying a dollar of taxpayer money towards this. So the last minute issue is you're going to pay this whether the building is open or not on August 1st.
Okay, that was one of my other questions as well.
They have agreed to that. What we've agreed as a concession is we are not going to make them pay their escrow at that same time. So we're going to delay the escrow 12 months so they can have some cash flow before that has to happen.
Okay.
So those have been the two big moving pieces.
So there won't be any kind of money that's going to be leaving the city to fund this project at any point?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And it also mentioned that we're going to be kind of co-building. It says that we're going to be responsible for financing and assisting with the construction of the multi-sport facility.
Yes, as owner, since we'll own it.
And so what is involved with that responsibility of co-constructing it?
Yes.
Will any staff be pulled away to go do anything there?
We absolutely will. So there'll be a procurement process, and we're going to write through, we're going to go through all the criteria of what that is.
Okay.
So it's not a bidding, but it is a process that we have to go through. And it's just something we have to work through, and it's going to involve every single department pretty much, because you've seen finance today, and they'll talk more about that, from building services, public work, planning, and economic development. So staff will absolutely be involved. And the Stars will be involved as well. So we'll be involved together as a team, as a partner.
Okay.
But we will be the owner of the building, so we both have to agree, both partners have to agree on the design. We work through the conceptual designs in March, April, so there aren't really surprises, but we haven't hired anyone to do anything because we don't have the money yet, because we don't have the bond. So
Yeah.
it's interesting. Yes, I wasn't crazy about putting a red line, on Friday of a packet, but you have to do what you have to do. And so I do have a cleaner version of our red line, and I can hand it out, and I don't expect you to read 45 pages in 30 seconds. But I will go through on one of my slides as well what the main points are, just so that we all can understand it and talk through it. So
Okay.
it's a process.
All right.
It's been interesting.
Thank you so much. I don't have any other questions.
Councilmember Williams.
That answers it for me as well.
Okay. Councilmember Jackson.
Thank you, Mayor. So I do have a number of questions on item I-1, the ordinance. The definitions within this ordinance state that a multifamily is any property with 3 or more dwelling units. However, this current ordinance is only applicable to those with 5 or more dwelling units. That's correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Do we have 3 and 4 unit dwelling units in the city?
I'm sure we've got a number of triplexes and quadruplexes.
Okay.
I'm sure, I don't know, I'm sure staff can.
There's 8 quadplexes across the street on Goodland and Goodland Place.
Okay, so those will not be or any new builds of those types of properties will
Correct.
not be subject? Okay.
Correct.
Do we know what just the approximate cost is for property owners in complying with this ordinance? Do we have any estimates or ideas?
The estimate for what? I didn't probably hear you.
Estimate of complying with the ordinance for the security on the,
For the multifamily?
right.
I'm going to call my super friend that wrote the ordinance and that has the agenda item for the multifamily.
We're phoning a friend. That's fine. I'm
I
just,
think he walked out, but he'll be back.
okay.
I'm pretty sure I saw Leo leave when I was
That's
walking in.
fine. I'm just curious what the cost to the property owners will be. I know
For not
that's-
complying?
No,
What they're-
for complying.
For complying.
All right, the cost of equipment, the cost of
Oh.
signage.
I know we do have an estimate, or he would.
Yeah,
Because I remember asking.
that's all dependent on the size of the complex as well,
Sure.
too.
Right, and how many buildings they have.
Okay, all right.
So we'll find him and get that estimate.
Okay, very good. Other questions on I-2, the contract with Dallas Stars? I understand that this document right now there's a lot of cleanup needed. On the first page of that document, there was the amount of the monthly rent that was stated.
Correct.
Has that been updated in your latest version?
It has, and so this morning, we sold bonds. We have the actual number now. If we're talking about the contract for the multi-sport complex, we have the actual number as of an hour ago.
Okay.
So that's how this is moving. We have a debt service table too, and I'm going to print that out. And when you're done with study session, you'll get a packet with a new debt service table. That has the real life numbers as of today and what the payments are going to be from year 2023 to 2047, roughly.
Okay. But the way that I would figure the annual rent that we can expect to receive from the Dallas Stars would be the rate times the total amount of the bond? Is that?
Essentially, it's 100% tied to the debt service, and about 15 days before the debt service is owed, we're going to get the money in the door, so then we can pay the debt service.
The way we've structured it is the initial payment will be essentially an amount equal to the single highest annual, combined annual, because the debt service payments are being made in, I think they're still in August, February and August.
Yeah,
still
February and August.
The schedule. So we'll combine those two numbers for each calendar year, take the highest number, and that'll be the first payment we make. And what that'll do is that'll provide enough cash flow to make that second payment, because the first payment's going to be actually August the 13th of 23.
15. 2 days.
Of August 2023.
Correct.
Correct.
Yeah.
The 15th.
And then, the next payment's due in February of 2024. The monthly payments will start in September of 2023. And what we'll do is we'll take that high amount, divide it by 12, and that becomes the monthly amount. While if we didn't take the additional amount in August, we probably wouldn't have enough in February, but the way we're structuring it is we'll have actually, because the interest payment for August of 2023 is actually less than the 1.6 we're talking about.
Correct.
So that'll give us about 400,000 plus or minus cushion to then carry us cash flowing through February when we make a payment, and then continuing on to August, and it'll continue to cash flow like that.
Okay.
And let me add this. This might be, like, right now, we're trying to verbally walk you through something that you will have a document. I think I mentioned this to you prior to the start of the meeting, and it might be good to mention it to the full council and to the public. Item J1, related to the bond issuance. What you will receive from our financial advisors that we worked with on that transaction that happened this morning, consistent with any other debt issuance, is a document that outlines the specifics of the bond issuance. So what's important to know now, maybe as you have questions, is that we have worked closely to make sure that the debt service schedule that just got, how tightly are we working, that just got solidified about a couple of hours ago, is consistent with the lease. That's another reason why, even if this were, a perfect situation, you wouldn't have had a final version of the lease, because we're trying to marry two things up, one of which happened a couple of hours ago. So what the main point that is important to know, without having all of the information in front of you, which you will have at 6 o'clock, is that we have worked closely to make sure that the debt service and the revenue that will come in to cover the debt service are moving in lockstep with one another, and we don't have any financial situation, as we have worked through this transaction, that causes the city to fund any portion of this transaction in advance.
Okay.
Those are the main points.
Right,
Okay.
and so I think just for reference in our regular meeting tonight, I'd like for us and the public to hear in very summary fashion sort of the cash flow timing, right? Construction crews are going to start working next month. We probably have to pay them. Where's that money going to come from, and how all of that's working? Just in general terms, so that everyone understands
Okay.
exactly what you just said. this contract with the Stars is going to pay for this facility. Right, at the end of the day, that's the story. Okay, great. In 6.5, it talks about the city is paying for personal property
Yes.
to be used by the Stars. What type of personal property would that be?
Basketball hoops, volleyball nets, the things that the volleyball goes in, that's all going to be personal property in the building, if we're talking about the new multi-sport complex.
Right.
And really not much else. We did have that provision in there. It was more relevant to the ice hockey center, so really it'll be kind of minor things. And other than that, we don't really have much personal property that we would own in the event that they left. And it's defined, it's going to be in the budget of the $23.3 million construction schedule, and you have to have it anyway if you're going to be open for basketball. You need to have the basketball hoops
Right.
and the volleyball nets
Right, okay.
Yeah,
and bleachers.
Yeah, it's largely going to be, like you said, the basketball hoops that, that are, and the structures that are actually attached to the ceiling that raise up so you can play volleyball in the same courts. Technically, those can be removed, and so we treat them, they often are treated as personal property. One thing I did for those who know anything about secure transactions, I've made it clear that they cannot, because there's a provision that allows them to replace it at some point, and it's theirs until they leave. I've had an experience in another city where there was actually borrowed and put a security interest against those basketball goals. We're not going to have that in this one. We're not going to allow that in this one. So,
Okay, good.
So they can't borrow money and take security interest, give security interest to a lender on those basketball goals.
Okay. Very good. One other question. In 6.4, it talks about the city is going to bear the responsibility for building a parking lot that's outside of the budgeted amount. So in my understanding, that is not included in the money we're going to receive through the bond payments, that this is a parking lot that we've said, hey, we're going to pay for this.
Okay, it's a great question.
What's that
So
about?
right now, if y'all can picture where the parking lot is to the north of the Children's Star Center, a portion of that will be redone, and they will both have shared parking. And so it will be part of the deal collectively. It will also be a shared parking with another user. It happens to be them. It's just another platted property. So it's in the scope of the 23.3 budget. So I'm not going outside of 23.3 to build a parking lot.
Okay, so then
And
it
that,
seems to me that language needs to be updated to say that it
yes.
is within the budget
And
amount?
that has been cleaned up a little bit, just to be clear. And the parking code down there, thankfully, because it's in a transit-oriented area, allows shared parking. So we don't really have to build enormous amount of parking either. So it's kind of a nice scenario.
Can Dallas Stars multi-complex people park in the dark parking lot? When you say
I guess
shared,
anybody
is
can
all
park in the
that-
dark parking lot. It's across the street from Denton, but they can share the new multi-sport complex. That new building will have a parking lot between that building and the Stars and Children's Health Center, and those two assets can have a shared parking lot.
Okay.
And it will be similar to parking lot now, but it will be carved up a little bit because we have to abandon Carrick Street and carve up Carrick Street and carve up
Right.
just a little bit north.
Right, okay, very good.
And since I don't have a final design, I don't know the approximate square footage, but it is within the budget.
Okay, very good. Last question on disagreement, I promise. 16.18 defines unavoidable delay.
Yes,
So obviously, construction, pandemic, rain, materials, logistics, workers,
Yeah.
blah, 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 could cause delays in construction. It
Correct.
sounds like you guys are still working on, we need the Stars to start paying rent at a specific date, regardless of whether we've reached substantial completion as defined under the document.
yes. And so for the 16.8, I believe, for the unavoidable delay, we took out the word COVID that they put in, and we took out any kind of language absolving them from paying rent during an unavoidable delay. So that now is negligible. So they will pay the debt service payment on August 1st, 2023, as soon as they sign this contract.
Okay. So I did notice they had the word virus in
Yeah.
there. They added the word pandemic
Pandemic.
to epidemic in there. But generally, what the clause says is if they have to close because of any of that list of reasons, that the city of Farmers Branch forgives them for their rent for that prorated
That's been,
period.
That's what
been
they-
edited out.
But they did ask for that,
Yeah, the next,
In my copy, it said prorated, so that's why I'm asking.
right?
I think the,
They asked for it on Friday.
the version that was being given to you tonight does not have that language in it. We've removed that.
Because it doesn't work, because someone has to pay the debt service, and it's not me. So it's just,
Well, correct, and in our current contract with the
Right.
Stars, I noticed that we're gonna take $100,000 out because we gave them last May and June
oh,
off from rent. I'm assuming that was COVID related?
you mean for Children's Star Center in the month of May 2020?
Right,
Yes, there was a COVID relief for a portion of 2020.
Okay.
At that point, we did have an escrow account set up for things of that nature that we had never tapped into.
okay,
That is correct.
all right. So there's a lot.
There's a
in this
lot.
document that
What-
needs to be cleaned up, and obviously I trust that we're gonna do the right thing, and the Stars obviously is a great partner, but, there's a lot of questions here, so I'll just leave it at that.
And there's two documents. So, and they mirror one another. So that document was the Star Center, the original Children's Star Center
Right.
with the COVID relief. And so this one, of course, doesn't have any relief. It's brand new. So there is a lot. I'm thankful that everyone is interested in this because we've certainly been running a marathon. I've never run a marathon, but I now feel like I have. And so now that we have the debt service payment and schedules, and now that we have some more back and forth with the Stars, I do feel very good. But I do want to give you all the most current red line. But just to summarize, I'm going to have a slide of things that they're changed in the red line from Friday. Not formatting, because that would be a lot of stuff, and it's kind of irrelevant.
Right.
And Kevin does a lot of formatting.
Yeah. Okay. We'll move on. That's all the questions I have for regular session.
Leo's
Oh,
here.
yes.
Mr. Bonanno
Oh,
joined us.
So, Leo, thank you. Do we have an idea of what the cost is to property owners to comply with the multifamily code that we're putting in place? Let's just assume it's the maximum extent.
Unfortunately, no. What the new code will say, if it's approved this evening, is it's got a list of features that this system must perform, right? It's got to record color video. It's got to be stored for 14 days. It's got to have all these, it's got to check all these boxes. Well, the property owner will get to decide those things. Are you going to store video on site or with a service? Are you going to get the top of the line camera, or are you going to get the cheapest one you can find and be forced to replace it every year? So unfortunately, I really can't answer that one for you. It's going to be up to them.
That's fine. Just
Yeah.
was curious.
Yeah, and I'm sorry I wasn't here earlier. I was here and then popped out, and of course, when I'm not here, that's when I'm needed the most. So,
Of course.
thanks.
Councilmember Merritt.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have one clarifying question. Mark Bentley, I see you in the back of the room. This is regarding item H2, which is the elevated flare
That's actually
Camelot.
Shane. That's actually Mr. Davis.
Oh, Mr. Davis. Excellent. Shane, thank you very much. Just to clarify, the council previously approved both the purchase of the equipment as one item and the installation of the equipment as a second item.
Correct.
And so the extension of the extra cost incurred here is for the implementation or the installation of said equipment.
Correct.
And so the clarification that I have is they're going to go ahead and start the work. And if I read it correctly, we're going to be able to be in compliance with the equipment that we have as the new equipment arrives. And I know that's a lot of shifting going on, and I appreciate.
Right now, right now we have a gas energy plant on site plus a flare. When those are both running, we're fine. At some point in time, we got to take the gas energy plant down for maintenance. It's a large engine, so when it goes down, we're not able to burn all the gas that the landfill produces. And we're just due to the size of our current existing flare. So the new flare is ready now. And so that's the problem, is now it's going to be broken into two mobilizations. So we'll take possession of the flare, get that set up, create a temporary connection to the flare, which has more capacity. So we'll be able to make it work and burn all the gas when the plant goes down. But what we really need in addition to that is another blower. We have 2 blowers on site now. We need a third one to pull all the gas the landfill is producing. So unfortunately, due to logistics, supply chain issues, the blower is not ready yet. So he's gonna get the flare installed, get it connected. Once the blower is ready, he'll come back out, install a blower and a flame arrestor, which, anyway, I don't think anyone knows what that's for, but anyway, it's very important for the flare to work correctly should you have a downdraft that'll melt, safety feature. But once those are both here, then they'll come back and install those, and then it'll be all done. But due to the logistics of coming out twice, that was not anticipated at the original bid.
Correct. And I want to give you a lot of kudos for making sure that we're in compliance in this transitional phase. I think that's a great way to address this. And
You can thank me, but a lot is being done by our contractor, trying to do as well everything any little tweak we can do in the field to keep things working the way they're supposed to.
thank you very much, Shane.
You're
Appreciate
welcome.
that. Mayor, I don't have any other questions. Obviously, we'll have a lot of discussion during our regular session on the items that have been discussed already.
Cool. Thank you very much. We'll move on to A2, receive a presentation from the City of Dallas Office of Homeless Solutions regarding its mission and services. They will be joining us via Zoom this evening. So given that that is the platform which we have to hear this presentation, I would ask that we let them get through the entire presentation and then we'll start our questions from there.
Good afternoon, council members and mayor. I am trying to get my computer to start. There we go. Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for having us here today. I am Director Crossley of the Office of Homeless Solutions, City of Dallas. Can everybody see the presentation?
Not yet.
You need to share screen?
I know it sent it to RG, who was going to share it. If not, I can try and share screen here.
Hold on one second. So they can control it? Yeah. Okay, perfect. All right. Ms. Boyd, if you would go ahead and take control of the screen and share your presentation, prefer to do it that way.
Okay, let me check.
There we go.
All right, can everyone see that?
Yep.
Perfect. Okay, so thank you. I'm going to try and keep this brief. Really what we wanted to do today is just talk about what OHS does, our toolkit, how we use it, and answer any questions you all might have. I was told a while back there was a meta study going on with Farmers Branch and a couple other of the large cities in the area about how best to support the unsheltered community. So I'm happy to share what we do. I also wanted to mention that I have our Chief David Hughes, who is in charge of the Dallas City Marshals with us today, and Diane Gibson, who's our chief in charge of the community courts. So there are some people who are more in the law enforcement side who do amazing work there as well, who can also answer questions. Okay, so with that, as I said, we're going to go over the Office of Homeless Solutions, our organizational structure. Our 4-track strategy is kind of the playbook that was assigned to us or voted into place by City Council in 2018. We were stood up in 2017, so a fairly young department. Our outreach initiatives, what a service request timeline looks like, SRs go in 2311, and then homeless service initiatives by district. So with that, just a little bit about OHS. As I said, we were established in October 1 of 2017. We are a department that really has 3 different parts, 3 different divisions. Two of those divisions handle contracts and finance. So I would say about two-thirds, of what we do is taking federal, state, and city funding and contracting it out via grants and awards to stand up various projects and help run various shelters and programs that house people. And then the last third of what we do is direct outreach. We have an outreach team that is 14 people strong for 14 districts. So in our upcoming budget, we're going to be looking to expand that a bit. But they handle everything from our service requests that have anything to do with those who are unsheltered that go into our 311 system, to working with our Panhandling initiative, which we'll go into a little bit, and then also talking about our, helping co-lead encampment decommissioning for a Dallas real-time rapid rehousing initiative. And they do all of that work in partnership with the larger continuum of care, which is obviously Dallas and Collin counties. Lead agency is Metro Dallas Homeless Alliance, MDHA. And they work with them on a regular basis, and then also formally through the Dallas Real-Time Rapid Rehousing Initiative. So next slide, and I'm going to go through this quickly. When we're done, I'll keep these slides up so I can go back to anything you want to take more of a look at. I know this is very, very dense in terms of data. So this is just what our organizational structure looks like. And you'll notice here that there is, my program administrator is actually standing up a 4th division. We've had enough people who say, hey, I want to get involved. How do I do it? How do you volunteer? That we are standing up a volunteer services division. What we're going to do with that is screen and develop a volunteer database that can help us during inclement weather shelters. So, we have plenty of trained people and staffers who can get there during the inclement part where nobody really should be outside and traveling. But we really need people to help us with the standing up and the breaking down of the shelters. That's kind of when there aren't a lot of people there, especially during the breaking down part of the shelters. And obviously by then the inclement weather is gone, so being back on the road is safe. The rest of the year, we are going to work to develop a volunteer database that really helps direct people to other organizational opportunities, because there really isn't a one-size-fits-all database in at least Dallas that shows the breadth and width of everybody else's opportunities. And so we're kind of looking to fill a gap there. And then, of course, we know there are a lot of organizations who want to help. They just need a way to connect with other people. You'll also see I have my assistant director who's over finance and contracts, what those teams look like. And then we have our homeless outreach manager, that's the street outreach. And then she is over our homeless outreach team. And then we have a specific person who project coordinates for the DRTRR, Dallas Real-Time Rapid Rehousing Initiative. And that actually soon will have its own set of 2 or 3 street outreach people who are specifically round the clock dedicated to DRTRR. So with that, let's look at our 4-track strategy. So you'll note that this was approved by Dallas City Council on August 1st, 2018. We had that first year to get our feet under us, that first budget year, and then coming up to the end of the first fiscal year, which for us is October 1 to September 30 of every year, we had this playbook developed. And so this was developed in consultation with our Citizen Homelessness Commission. That is the advisory board that I report to. Our council commission is the Housing and Homelessness Solutions Committee. And then obviously we go to City Council. But at this point, it really was just the CHC working directly with the Dallas City Council to plan what our tracks would be. And at the time, the tracks were done to address what we had going on then. So you'll note that some of these, track 3 is talking about a specific program, and track 4 is talking about a 2017 bond program that had $20 million in it for housing. And to date, as of February of this year, we actually spent 23.4 of that. So we're very good at spending. We have spent it all and some. And we have done those new developments. But, what you're looking at then is a playbook that is a couple of years old. We've been through a pandemic. We've been through a couple of recessions since then. And so this past June, we've spent doing community town halls with our council members. And we've done a couple meetings with our unsheltered population. And we've also done some with our homeless service providers to show them how we have spent and what we have spent on over the past year. and say, hey, based on all of this, based on the trends we see, based on the needs we see, let's update the playbook. And so how should we update it? And so we're actually going to be presenting all of that feedback to council in August because they have to approve any changes. So just to give you that kind of color of the landscape and where we are, track one was to increase shelter capacity. So at the time, all this was tied to was a pay-to-stay shelter program where we spend about $219,000 annually to support an additional 50 beds in overflow shelter at our flagship shelter downtown called The Bridge. And it used to pay for up to 50 beds. This year we renegotiated the contract and they said, hey, we're actually doing a lot with that money. Can we make 50 the minimum and we'll house as many as we can above 50? So we said, sure, that's wonderful. We have anecdotally tied things to this since then and said, okay, well, you know, Dallas Real-Time Rapid Rehousing Initiative is going to take people out of shelters and rehouse them. That will clear space in shelter for those who would want it. And so that increases shelter capacity. That also would be, you know, tied to any of our buildings that we've purchased and that we're redeveloping, which are new developments. Taking people out of shelters also increases shelter capacity. So you can tie things to it as well, and everything that we do has to be tied back to one of these 4 tracks. Inclement weather shelter, I think you guys are pretty familiar with this as well. We had 20 nights this past winter that were triggered by these rules. And within that, we had almost or right over 4,000 bed nights. And that's not to say that we had 5,000 people who are homeless. We don't. But at the same time, we did have roughly 5,000 instances of people seeking shelter. So 5,000 utilizations of beds over 20 nights. Right now, when it's above 100 during the day and higher than 80 degrees at night, it's less during the summer about getting people indoors overnight. It's more having cooling centers, having resources at those cooling centers. Our shelters and our day centers are open for longer. They're utilizing lobby space to have people in. We're handing out water. So it's really more about helping people during that daytime heat exposure. Landlord Subsidized Leasing Program. This is a program that's $3.25 million, over 3 years. So it's a 1-year contract with 2 1-year renewal terms. It annualizes out to about 1.05 per year. And this is actually a contract held by City Square right now, if you're familiar with them, that provides rental assistance, utilities, basically in terms of if you have someone who for a certain amount of time needs the rent paid on their behalf, but they are in a private lease in their own apartment, then this would be they would be part of this program. So the lease is subsidized by City Square, but City Square does not hold the lease. And it is what we call scattered site housing, which means that the subsidy is attached to you, not the housing. So it's not project-based, which would be attached to the building, not you. If you left, you wouldn't take the subsidy with you. But at the same time, it is a private lease so that after that subsidy is gone, you have still accrued that rental credit and that rental history, which makes it a lot easier for you to rent, especially in a very competitive market, which we are seeing. And then, as I said, new developments. This is in terms of buying or building long-term housing, supportive service places. You'll see in there was even the possibility of day centers at one point. Again, this was very broad. This was 2017. And we didn't know quite what we were going to do with that $20 million. As of now, we have purchased a couple of properties. We've purchased 4. I think total, that'll be roughly another 448 units that are stood up. We've helped stand up one of the St. Jude facilities that was done through Catholic Housing Initiative and Catholic Services. Very excited to help partner on that along with Dallas County. So we've done a really, really good job of stretching that $20 million. And we will be doing more new developments, although I think the next bond is coming in 2024, and that's going to be an economic development bond. So again, in terms of looking at how we move forward and refresh the playbook, if you will, we're looking at how do we tweak this language so we have a playbook that allows us to move forward. It's not tied to something we no longer have because we have used it all. So OHS outreach initiatives, and I promise we are almost done. I know it's a lot of information. I'm going to keep these up afterwards. This is just kind of the highlights of what we're doing right now. As I mentioned, Dallas Real-Time Rapid Rehousing Initiative, that is a $72 million initiative, so the American Rescue Plan funding. There was the Treasury fiscal recovery funding, and then there was a specific amount that was blocked out by the federal government just for housing and homelessness. So we got about 21 million for that, 21.4. And the city said, okay, let's make it 25, and we'll put 25 million towards this initiative to take people off the street now and support them in rapid rehousing, but then also let's utilize all the vouchers that are coming out of that housing and homelessness funding nationally as well for people who need longer term housing, who have higher barriers. And so then Dallas County said, okay, we'll put in 25 million as well. MDHA put in 10 million. And then we have vouchers from the Dallas Housing Authority, from Dallas County, from a couple other cities that all total that remaining 12 million. And so with all of that, we are saying our goal is to house 2,700 individuals. I know it says households, but individuals by the end of 2023. The end of our fiscal year is September 30th, 2023. Our halfway mark is 1,000 people housed by September of this year. And we're actually at, it was 912 last week. I think if you look at the community dashboard this week, it might be either a little lower, a little higher. Sometimes the numbers fluctuate a tiny bit because it's in real time. But we're basically 90 to 91% of our way to that goal. So we're very excited about that. All of this includes a component which is the encampment decommissioning. I know that I've talked a little bit about that to some representatives of Farmers Branch over the past, but what that is we know that there is a demographic that is emergency shelter resistant. And it's not that they don't want to be housed, it's that they have had issues with emergency shelter in the past for some reason. It doesn't fit what they need. You know, it's not a one size fits all, and that's okay. I worked with plenty of people in the past who were emergency shelter resistant, and you need another avenue to housing if you're going to get them into housing and recovery for whatever it is they're facing. And so this arm of the DRTRR is led by our OHS Street Outreach team in conjunction with the Metro Dallas Homeless Alliance, who brings together all of the other nonprofits who have taken the RFP and bid and been awarded parts of that contract through MDHA. And so we all work together and go out, and it's a 4 to 6 week process where my team goes out first to an encampment that we've said we're going to close this one down through housing, and says, okay, who's here? We form a by name list. We start talking to people. The by name list has, here's your name, here's your barrier to housing, here's what you need. And we really start to form a really good idea of, okay, this person has a dog that's a service animal, or they don't, and it's a pit bull that's harder to house. They lost their ID. They have no birth certificate because they lost it in a fire. This person might have, you know, an SO, sex offense, or a felony charge that's 20 years old. That's still difficult to house. Now, obviously, if the felony was 6 months ago, we're not talking to the right people. We're going to transition you to a different program that's not putting you in a private home or a private apartment. But through all of that, we then get to a point where within that 4 to 6 weeks, they have worked with not only my team, but they've enrolled into a new program that has a case management that's going to be with them for the next 12 to 24 months. They're going to, that case manager is going to bring in everything else they need, whether that's financial literacy classes, job training, maybe they never got their GED, maybe they need to get tickets expunged. And some of that, depending on where you are in that legal process, you could work with community courts, which I know that we have Diane Gibson with us as well. So they'll tailor it to your needs, mental, behavioral health, substance use, what have you, to make sure that not only are you housed, but you're recovered or on the path to recovery, so that within that 12 to 24 months, you can come back into kind of the workforce and back into just the normal citizenry without that support. Now, for people who need longer term support, we have those 758 vouchers, and we're actually getting national attention for our use of those because the federal government said they really wanted us to make a point of using those for people with the highest barriers. And we have a lot of chronic homeless. We have 1,029 chronically homeless people on the streets right now across the COC, although I think Collin County makes up about 9% of that. So most of it is Dallas. And that we're using our vouchers for a lot of those because they do need longer term support in housing, and so that's getting national attention. And then of course we're closing down encampments because everyone's been housed. So instead of closing down an encampment and saying you can't be here, go somewhere else, and then we'll go somewhere else and tell them you can't be here either, we are saying, hey, we're going to house you. And when we close the site down, we put a sign up, we make sure there's security to make sure that no one's coming back. It's because there's no one to come back. And that's been very, very effective. And then obviously we're also pulling people out of shelters to go into that housing as well. So it's not like you need to suddenly leave a shelter and go to the street so that you can be housed. It's not the case at all. Street outreach, 311 requests. You'll see a brief slide after this, and like I said, I'll bring it up in a minute, but this is just how we use 311. Everything that we do has to be data-based, and so that all goes into our non-emergency response, which is 311. We have an app, we have an email, it's on the website, it's super accessible. I've done community meetings where we literally help people open their phones and go through 311 and how to file a request. Anything that touches homelessness comes to my folks, and so then we end up resolving all of those or transferring them to the appropriate department. And so the next page, we have an SR timeline, and the reason for that is just to give people a little bit more transparency into what it looks like when your SR comes through, or when you do that. Last one, Panhandling Deflection Initiative. This one is targeted at identifying the most active panhandlers in sites across the city via 311. And then we go out in conjunction with the Dallas Marshals, which, as I said, I think Chief Hughes is there today, community courts, Diane Gibson's here. And then we also go out with our mobile crisis team, which was led by Director Kevin Oden, and I don't think he's here today. But this is, and basically that is our mental health team. So we have two versions of the mental health team. There is Right Care that sits within the 911 dispatch. So anytime someone is unsheltered and having a mental health crisis, if 911 is called, Right Care can go out. The mobile crisis team is non-emergency. So if we're out in the field, panhandling deflection, and I see someone along 635, which this has happened, and my team says, hey, they're not homeless, or they are homeless, because again, most of these people that we know, only about 20% are actually homeless. And they say, hey, we know this guy and he is sleeping under the bridge, but he also doesn't want to move because he's got a bunch of dead birds on top of him and he's afraid he's going to move them. This has happened. And then I'm going to call Kevin and say, hey, I think we have somebody your team needs to check out. And so they're going to go out there, they're going to engage with the person and make sure they get the services they need. Because that obviously is not someone I would want to put into an apartment at that point. For those who are homeless, we work with them through the Dallas Real-Time Rapid Rehousing Initiative. Everybody else, we really try and work with and say, hey, I realize that you're out here because you obviously have some financial need. As I said, about 20% are homeless, but we know that in the city of Dallas, about 80% are not. It doesn't mean that they are financially stable. Obviously, they have some need, but they are housed. A lot of that is unstably housed. So, they might be out there because they have a bill they need to pay. They might be at an area shelter. But there are better ways to make those financial ends meet. And that's something that our community courts team is really, really good at having those conversations. If you get the Class B citation because you're illegally soliciting, and that means that you were actively in the street and a Dallas Marshal has seen you being actively in the street, actively asking for funds or food or what have you, then you can get that citation. If you plead guilty or no contest, then you can go work with community courts to expunge the ticket, and that opens up a whole world of supportive services that are really, really great. We obviously don't want to get to that point. What we want to do is talk about services that you can have and how can we help you meet this need without being here. And we want to make sure that people know that we're going to keep showing up and we're going to keep asking you if you need help, to the point that this is not, this really isn't the most feasible way to make ends meet anymore. In fact, we're really, really annoying and we're going to keep coming back. At Forest and 75, we now randomize our cleanings there. We're there 2 days a week. We don't say when we're going to be there. And we have some people who aren't homeless, but they know that intersection is very lucrative. and they're not going to leave unless we make it super annoying to be there. And they have told my street outreach workers that. They know my people on site. But we're going to keep coming and we're going to keep talking to you, and eventually you are going to have to find somewhere to be that is not here. And the thing that leads to is the other part of this is really making sure that we educate people around the unintended consequences of street charity, which that means street feeding, donating funding to people. And the reason for that is, we have a lot of very well-intentioned giving that is organizations who are making sandwiches or buying pizzas and taking them to people on the street corners. And, I've seen it plenty of times. And I think that is a great thing to do. There's a great compassion and desire to help that we really love. But the way that it's been done in the past is actually now kind of keeping people where they are, because now you are saying, okay, well, we know there's going to be food here. We know there's going to be money here. So instead of going to a shelter where I could get these, services and this food for free, I'm going to stay here. And, that might be okay, except for the fact that then instead of having food and having a shower and clothing, where there are a whole host of services that could put you on the pathway to housing, financial literacy, reclaim your ID, get a PO box at the stew pot so you can receive mail and file for, any of the COVID relief that came through that these people now cannot access because they didn't have an address. Communicate with your family. All of those things need services that you're not going to get if all you're doing is getting a sandwich on the side of the street. So really, it's more about how can we make this giving more impactful? How can we help you partner with an existing organization, or even just go set up in a church parking lot so there are trash cans around so the trash isn't flowing into the stormwater drain, or so sanitation's not having to work overtime on Easter to pick up even more food, or DPD's not having to worry about a smoker that blocked traffic in South Dallas because it wanted to pull up and do barbecue. So we really appreciate that. And, I'm someone who grew up in Dallas. I grew up making sandwiches every Wednesday night to be passed out on Sundays. And I think it's just saying, hey, we appreciate that, but let's tweak it a bit. And we have a community liaison who does that, who does really wonderful work engaging with people. And we have seen that has been, there is a shift now a little bit. It's still early on, but a shift to make that giving more sustainable, which hopefully then will lead to some of these areas not being as lucrative for people to stay at. And then obviously we also have signage that is placed saying, please don't give, call 311 instead. We also have our Calling, if you're familiar with it, is the day center in South Dallas that has these amazing, very comprehensive resource booklets. They update them twice a year. And so we have a bunch of those that we give out to our council members. I give out to groups I talk to, because there are a lot of business owners who don't want people on their property, but they feel bad telling them to leave if they don't have anything to give them. Some people who want to hand out, money or food at street corners, if they had this to hand them instead to point to where resources are, they might not hand that out as much. Okay, so let's see if this is. Okay, so this is just the service request timeline. We can come back to this. I believe that you guys have this so you can look at it later in depth. And then our last one here is just homeless service initiatives by district. So we had the charge from our city council a while back that they wanted us to have services in every district. They wanted us to make sure that the city was sharing the wealth that every district had to give, and that we did not have a concentration of services in just one district. Obviously, that's not terribly equitable for the citizens or for the city in terms of financial impact on businesses, but it also means that if you had all of your services located in, let's say, the outside of District 3, and you've got someone who is homeless in District 10, well, they're not going to go over to District 3, even if that's the only resource there, because their entire community, maybe their doctors, the person who is their family on the street, their pet, it's all in District 10. And so it's much more likely that someone will go to receive help if there is a service that is near them and familiar, in an area that is familiar to them. And so you can see that we have a couple that are in progress, we've just purchased. And then we have 3 where we are working with those council members and the working groups in those areas, which is just the voice for the community to figure out what they want that service to look like and what's going to fit them best. Okay, and that is it. I know I said I'd be brief, so unfortunately I don't think I was terribly truthful. But I am here to answer questions. I know Chief Hughes and Diane Gibson, I believe, are also on the call, and I will just leave this up in case you want me to scroll back to any particular window.
Ms. Crossley, thank you very much for your presentation. I appreciate the work and effort your team is making. I'm going to start on my right with Councilmember Merritt. Any questions?
No questions. I'd just like to thank Director Crossley for her presentation.
Councilmember Jackson.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Crossley, for giving us that information. A couple of questions for you. Is there an educational program for residents to help them understand how and how not to interact with panhandlers and the transient community?
So yes, we are in the process of creating it. As I said, we recently hired in November a community liaison, Marcy Jackson, who's wonderful. I'm happy to connect you guys to her because she's in the process of standing that up and working on developing all of that to work with the community.
Okay, thank you. And you mentioned that there is signage telling, folks not to give, at the street corners and such, because that just simply enables them or encourages them to stay. How do we go about requesting signage in certain areas?
So we could send the template for what we have to your transportation department. For us, the way that it works is our transportation department fabricates it. I have been round and round with our Department of Transportation and CAO over what we could post. Certain colors mean certain things, and so there was a lot of legality around what colors we could use. So I don't know if that would be different in Farmers Branch, you'd have to check. But at the end of the day, we then said, okay, we have this many spots. We had 9 locations that were very, very high on our panhandling radar. And so we said we want 4 signs per spot so that we have 4 signs at, the 4 different points of the intersection. 2 of those we were able to split to 2 signs each, which is why we have 9. And then we said, transportation, how much would it cost to fabricate and install these? And they gave us a quote. We said, okay. And now anytime a district wants additional signage, their council member has to say, here's where the funding is going to come from. And they use discretionary dollars to fund signage in their district.
Okay, thank you. I think, Mayor, that's something that perhaps we should discuss, is signage along 635 and 35. I know the areas I'm thinking of are actually Dallas proper, so it's not Farmers Branch property, but.
Yeah, I made a note to reach out.
Thank you. Last question, Ms. Crossley, if you could go back to the district map.
Mm-hmm.
How are these districts drawn or determined?
Well, actually, we just had the redistricting process. It's done every 10 years, and that's not my department, but I can tell you that the Office of Governmental Affairs led that. And this year was redistricting. So this map actually is good until our election. And then at the election, the new map will come into play, and that was just decided on. So I don't have a link to it, but I know it's on our city map, or our city website, excuse me.
So these are based on your council districts?
Yes, these are council districts.
Okay, all right, thank you. I didn't understand that at first. That's all, Mayor, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Williams.
Ms. Hoy, it looks like we butt up against the parts of Farmers Branch that are struggling right now with homelessness and with panhandling. Seem to butt up against your District 6 and District 13. And I noticed that you had mentioned that there was an area on 75 that y'all are sweeping now twice a week for panhandlers to increase that annoyance factor. I know you guys have done a sweep at the southern side of 635 in Josie and on the southern side of 635 in Marsh. Is there some way that we can look and that we can kind of direct residents to look on what I know that we try not to schedule that or make that a public schedule, because all that does is just prepare them to be gone for that night and then be back. How can we kind of advise residents that there are things going on and And we are working in partnership with the city of Dallas to kind of tackle those areas that we're partnering together with.
You know, I would say, I think it's, and again, this is something I think it's really about getting the message out around why giving can be harmful. You know, the resource booklets from our calling are a great way to start a conversation. We can certainly, you know, connect whoever it would be at Farmers Branch with our calling to get those. And I think just, you know, pointing to the panhandling presentations we've done, which we can send you the latest one. We did a 6-month pilot update to our committee that we report to on that in June. And now it's going to be quarterly, and we're seeing success. I think you can also say, you know, we have gone and done debris removal, which we're not necessarily sweeping in encampment, but we are saying, hey, there's a lot of trash here, a lot of trash, and this is not a public storage unit. And that's what we do at Forest and 75 as well, is we come and we remove all of that debris. And we will keep doing that. We are also going to be coming to these areas with the Dallas Real-Time Rapid Rehousing Initiative to break the cycle and house people. Now, I can't say when. Obviously, then, you know, I don't want everybody lining up in a certain area because they know that this is coming. It's successful and word is getting around, which is great. But, you know, if we show up to a site and there's, you know, 70 people there and we only prepared for 10, then that's going to be a problem. But it is coming back to this site, and we are aware of it. And so I think, you know, for me, it's just seeing, well, I know that Farmers Branch has a desire to help as well, to work with these people and to make sure that this cycle doesn't continue. So I'm just really happy to share kind of our toolbox and say, what is it that you all would like, and how can we help you stand that up so that it doesn't feel quite so one-sided? Because I know we have a lot going on, but we also have, again, my attention gets pulled in a lot of different directions that are not just 635. So I want to make sure that Farmers Branch is well equipped as well.
Good. Okay. All right. Councilmember Roman.
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Seeing none. Ms. Crossley, thank you very much for your time today. We truly appreciate it.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, council members. Next is
A3, presentation of the State of Tourism 2022. Mrs. Coates.
Wow. Don't know what to do with that.
Real booming voice these days.
Okay, first of all, I'd like to introduce Ann Stokes. Ann has been with our tourism team for many, many years. And actually, she started with the city of Farmers Branch when she was in college, which was just literally the other year, right? And she is married to one of our lieutenants, Eric Stokes. So it's fair to say, sorry.
Deputy Chief.
He is a deputy chief now.
Yes.
So now you know more about Ann. You may have seen her for a long time, but she's a contractor with our city, and I've invited her to give us a state of tourism. We were asked to provide some tourism data. So here's Ann Stokes.
Thank you, Allison. Mayor, City Council, let's get started. So first, let's look at the performance of the HOT Fund. If you can look, it's there, okay? So in 2018, 2019, we collected $3 million in hotel tax. It did dip down for 2 years, but if you're looking at the last column for 2021, 2022, that's this fiscal year, and we're already at 1.8, and we still have 4 months to go. So that's a good sign. The average daily rate comparison, so in 2019, the average daily rate was in the 90s. First quarter 2020, before COVID hit, it was in the 90s. It did dip down quite a bit, but looking at first quarter 2022, we're back up into the 90s. So this just shows you that the demand is coming back. I did touch base with a couple of our hotels to see what they were forecasting. The Hampton Inn was not open in 2019, but they are projecting for 2022 $3.6 million in sales and $4 million for next year. If you look at a full-service hotel, in 2019, the DoubleTree Galleria did 11.8 in sales. They're projecting in 2022 10.2 this year and $12 million next year. The tourism team does have 2 deal closing funds. These are agreements that are signed when contracts are signed with the hotel, and quite a bit of them are multi-year deals. They are the Hotel Transportation Fund and the Corporate Loyalty Program. Please note that these incentives are paid after the group consumes the rooms, and they're only paid upon the rooms that are generated. The multi-sports building. I am super excited about this, please. The possibility of 16 volleyball courts, 8 basketball courts. For this, I looked at the months that volleyball and basketball are played. Of course, tournaments can be all year round, but if you look at just 2 weekends of tournaments, it could be 154,000 additional tax revenue for the city. 3 weekends of tournaments, it would jump to 231,000. The World Cup. So the World Cup is known as the world's most popular event. It is held every 4 years for 1 month. If you look at this, the journey began back in 2017 when the bid committee was formed. In 2018, U.S. was selected for the World Cup. Last October, FIFA representation came and toured different venues. This June, Dallas was selected as one of the 16 host cities. We are looking at Brookhaven's campus as possibly a venue, possibly for ref training. Something like that would be pretty cool to have there. This year, Qatar is hosting the World Cup. It will be played in November because of the scorching heat in Qatar. It is with 32 teams. If you'll notice, next year is when the match locations will be announced, and it'll be for 48 teams. So they are increasing 16 additional teams for the World Cup 2026, and 20 additional games will be played. So that's pretty cool. Here are a couple of our partnerships that we have that help us bring in business to the city. Dallas Sports Commission is one that we work with to host larger events. I would like to take a moment to recognize our most valued partnership. This is kind of our lifeline for tourism. It's the Parks and Rec Department. Thank you very much. Without them, we couldn't do what we do. So thank you again. You guys are a lifeline. Thank you. This is just some pictures of our servicing team. There's Meredith and Nancy over there on the left. And this is just kind of the fun stuff that we get to do to welcome groups when they come to Farmers Branch. Are there any questions?
Mrs. Stokes, thank you for your presentation. Councilmember Roman, do you have any questions?
Yeah, when I was reviewing the presentation, I wasn't sure what the difference was between a select service hotel and a full service hotel.
Sure. So some of them don't have restaurants, big restaurants and bars, stuff like that. So like the Hampton Inn is a smaller property. It has less rooms compared to the Doubletree Galleria.
I see. Are there ever times that, we're having a big tournament and people are coming in from out of town where, despite the incentives that we provide them, they go and use a hotel somewhere else?
Correct. People are always wanting to use their points or find a better rate somewhere else. A lot of what we do is group-based business. They work with housing agencies to try to prevent that. But you always have the guy that's got the Hilton points that he wants to use to stay outside of the block. But we work with, majority of the time, housing agencies that help put the teams where they need to be. And there's also a called Stay to Play, to where you have to really prove to them, the Stars do it for hockey tournaments, you have to prove to them that you're staying in this hotel to be able to play in the tournament. Because if you'll notice, the average daily rate for the multi-purpose place was higher. It was 125, what I quoted at, compared to the average daily rate. And that is because a lot of these tournaments have additional needs that will go on top of that rate. For example, the tournament operator will get an incentive for every room that's booked, okay? So you'll pay, like your rate might be so much, but then they tack on the hotel or the tournament operator fees, the housing agency fees. So those tournament operators really want you to stay in that block.
Got it. Thank you.
Sure.
Councilmember Williams?
I don't have any questions. Thank you so much for all your hard work and anything that we can do to help support you guys and to continue to support our hotels and tourism. Let us know for sure.
Thank you. I tell John all the time, I have the best job in the city.
Councilmember Jackson, anything?
I'll just echo Councilmember Williams's comments. Let us know how we can help. Thank you very much.
Councilmember Merritt?
Ms. Stokes, thank you very much for all that you've done. I am the council member that asked for this, and I appreciate the presentation. Do have a couple of questions. Could you tell us the number of hotels, either full service or select, that are in the program, that are in the overall count?
Okay, so yes, I should know that. We've got the Sheraton, the Doubletree Galleria, the Wyndham is considered full service. Then we've got the Renaissance, the Doubletree Luna, the Hampton Inn, the new Holiday Inn, and Candlewood. So 7. There are some other ones that we work with, but not on a continuous basis. Say like the Comfort Inn over on Parkside, they do some of our stuff, but those are the majority of the ones we work with.
Very good.
And to answer your question too, the corporate loyalty program, that is open to any hotel because that is based upon a business generating at least 500 rooms per year that can be a part of our corporate loyalty program. And so it's a thank you. We're reimbursing $5 of their tax that they pay as a thank you because we know they can choose other cities, other hotels. And any of our hotels can be a part of that program.
Okay.
And that money is paid directly to the corporation.
Okay, very good, thank you. And a continuation, and I think it would be good if we had the list of hotels and obviously the number of rooms that would be
We have that.
extrapolated.
Okay.
So I think those would be good numbers to be able to have in a presentation like this. Do you happen to know the number of rooms?
We have over it's like 2,200 rooms.
Okay.
But for this presentation and the multi-purpose one, I did it based upon 555 rooms.
Okay.
Because we have 530 double rooms in the city.
Okay.
And most sports traveler families want to stay in a double room, which is 2 queen beds. The king ones, not so much. I did add in a couple of the kings for coaches.
Sure.
I prefer to stay in a king room.
Yeah.
But so that's why when I did those numbers, I based it upon the double rooms.
That's fine. As a father of a traveling soccer player, I understand those challenges as well. Could you tell us what the taxable rate is for the room? What is our
7%.
7%?
Yes.
Ms. Stokes, thank you again
Sure.
for all that you do. And again, I'll echo my peers here. If there's anything that we can do in our position here, please let us know. We'll be happy to support making Farmers Branch that destination that we need it to be and want it to be. So
Thank you. Would you like us to send you the list of hotels with the breakdown of the king rooms, double rooms, addresses?
I think if we have that information available to the public, I think that's more important. I don't necessarily need it, but I think we want to have that available as a reference if it's somewhere on.
I believe it's on our Discover Farmers Branch site.
If it's there, then perfect. Then
Great.
that's all we need to do. So
Awesome.
you. That's all, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Stokes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can we get a round of applause for Ann Stokes? Our tourism team is rarely seen. They're contractors, and they service all these people, and they rarely get any accolades. So while I could, I got you a round of applause. Thank you, Ann.
Thank you. Next is project options for possible November 2022 bond election. Mr. Mashburn.
Good afternoon, Council, Mayor. I feel like we've been here before, but we're back again. So, welcome. I will keep this fairly brief since we have been through this before. But before I get started, I did want to recognize several of our board members in the back audience here. We love the support, and they're a big part of some of the projects we're bringing forward to you this afternoon. So, we're here to talk about the quality of life bond initiative we're looking at possibly doing in November. I will remind you the deadline to decide on this is August, so we're coming up on that fairly quickly. I do have a myriad of pictures to show everyone in the audience that's hearing this for the first time, but I'll run through this fairly quickly since we discussed it before. Last we met, we discussed several project options. One of them was Farmers Branch Park. Hasn't had a refresh probably since the mayor's been born or before, so as referenced previously. Squire Park, that's a project, District 1, feels underserved. That's one that definitely needs a refresh and one that would benefit significantly from the enhancements. The park at the Branch Connection. So I do want to delineate the difference here. The Branch Connection renovation is a project we're already budgeting for next fiscal year, and that's the interior of the facility. The exterior would be the park portion that we're discussing. That would be a senior-only park. Trex Pathway at the John F. Burke Nature Preserve, currently under construction with decomposed granite. If a more durable surface is decided on, that would be $1.5 million. Barn Phase 2 we discussed and eventually decided to hold on, I believe, the last meeting, and the Recreation Center exterior. So that was what we previously discussed. During that study session, a new list of projects from what I heard from the discussion of council was a Farmers Branch Park, somewhere two options, one in the $3 million, one in the $6 million range, which I'll show you momentarily. Squire Park was still on there, Branch Connection, Trex Pathway, and then neighborhood investments. So there was streetlights that were discussed and some other amenities I'll talk about momentarily, median enhancements and whatnot. So we're budgeting roughly $2 million for that, for a bond package somewhere in the neighborhood of $9.7 to $12.7 million. So Farmers Branch Park, this was the initial option that we had discussed, and this was the full Monty, everything in there, 2 synthetic turf fields, many covered pickleball courts, covered seating for spectators. You also have parking, which currently is on-street parking, so that would solve a lot of issues there. A playground structure, restrooms, snack bar, a pavilion, and a grand entryway. We decided that that wasn't going to be possible, but here's some just brief images of what that would have looked like. A $6 million option still does have 2 synthetic turf fields in there. It does have uncovered pickleball courts, and you'll see 5 of those in the blue boxes. No shaded spectator seating, no track that's surrounding the place. A limited grand entryway. Again, no lights, heavily scaled back on some of the infrastructure and amenities there, but still a nice park. Oops. $3 million option. So this is your very basic, no synthetic turf fields. And this is shown on an outline from an aerial. This will look like just open grass space if we do this route. So very, very limited. It's essentially parking, pickleball courts, and reconfiguring infrastructure at Farmers Branch Park. You can tell the mayor loves this option. Squire Park. So this is exciting, weird shaped piece of land, but what you'll see in the green, or excuse me, the color is what we have to work with. And so this would have a basketball court, a sport court, if you will, a centralized children's play structure, a splash pad, which is one of the most requested amenities that we've discovered, both requesting from our department and on the resident satisfaction survey. So I think this would be an ideal place to put that as well. Just some quick images of what that could look like. And then here's the park at the Branch Connection. So this is an interesting space, very unique. As we know, weather in Texas can be very challenging. So ample shade structures here, some pavilion seating, but the idea is to appeal to a wider variety of 50 plus, if you will, out there. A large group of our membership base is 65 and up, and so we're trying to appeal to everyone from 50 to 110, if there's somebody out there. So anyways, this would have a basketball court, pickleball courts, putting greens, the full deal here. And other considerations. So the neighborhood investments I discussed, so medians, do we want to enhance several of those? I know that's a desire of those in our department, is to kind of enhance a lot of the medians. The entryways into the city, you should know you're in Farmers Branch and it should be pretty grand. Traffic calming, slow down. We are kind of a bedroom community in the heart of Dallas, so. And then lighting, I know Councilman Jackson, I believe that was a desire of yours, to look at neighborhood lighting and surrounding. So with that, I will open it up to discussion.
Thank you for bringing some of these options back as we're getting close to having to make a decision here internally of which way we want to go or not go. Since I started down there last time, Councilmember Mayor, I'll start with you this time.
Mr. Mashburn, thank you again for the presentation. One of the things, if we could go back to the Farmers Branch Park, I know we've discussed now 3 different monetary solutions or addressments, if you will. I want to make sure that I understand the middle $6 million option. Are those are be turf fields?
Yes, 2 turf fields.
And not synthetic?
Oh, excuse me, 2 synthetic turf fields. The third one in the dark green is grass.
Okay, just wanted to clarify it so that we are talking synthetic at the $6 million.
Correct.
Okay, very good. The sustainability folks would certainly like to not have to water, 2 additional fields, so I'm sure we could benefit from that, especially in the days that we have right now of 110 degrees outside. In the grander scheme of addressing park improvements, I know you do this on a annual basis of what is planned for normal maintenance, if you will. Help me understand the difference now, if you will, from regular maintenance, and I know new fields are not regular maintenance. I totally get that. But as we look at all our parks, how is this balancing out? Are we going to find ourselves potentially in another couple of years where we need to address several other parks, and we know that we've had issues with some regions of our community that are new, that are clamoring for new parks? And so I don't see that element in this, and I know it's a much bigger discussion amongst the council on how we can make all of this work in the budget. So I'm kind of throwing a big ugly ball back in your court, if you would, to try to field this and have a little bit of a discussion as we're paring down, as you said, on the targeted date to make a decision. Plus, we know we're all going to be huddled around a budget table in a few weeks as well and making these larger decisions. So the timing is now to make these things happen.
So are you asking how that relates to maintenance on the fields or replacement over time? Or all?
Let's talk about replacement. Obviously,
Okay.
maintenance is one thing, just
Sure.
keeping things going. But as we look at most things have a life expectancy of X years.
Yeah.
And so therefore you have to plan for the replacement of those X years.
Sure.
And I know we do a great job with our staff and working with facilities to make sure that we do those things. But I want to make sure that we're having a discussion in the public space now, that we're looking at all of these facets and not just, wouldn't it be great if we did this? And I want to make sure that we understand that in the open forum.
Sure. Yeah, and it's going to depend on the elements that are in there, but you're right. As we do new things, are we going to be hit in 10, 20 years with a gigantic bill? And that's entirely possible. With synthetic turf fields, there is a heavy amount of maintenance that goes into those, and those do need to be tore out and replaced every 10 or so years. And so that is just something to be aware of. As we add new playground structures that, let's just throw out a number, $500,000 playground with rubberized surface and the full go rather than a $30,000 structure off the shelf. When that needs to be replaced, that's going to be a big price hit. The good thing is playground structures typically last for a very long time, decades. So, and the one that we're putting in over here, Hoya, that's one, they've got structures up for 30 plus years. So that is the good thing. But yes, as we enhance the amenities throughout the city, there will be more replacement, if you will. And so we did that exercise. I'm trying to remember if that was, I think that was 2 years ago, where we determined what the actual cost was on an ongoing basis to replace what we currently had. And we arrived at about $636,000 a year just to get it up to speed. Now, part of that was deferred maintenance over time, right? At that time, that stuff was in there. It wasn't quite a priority to get the best of the best. And so we sorted off the shelf stuff and kept it for a long time. We've kind of upped the game a little bit. So we're sort of playing catch up at this point. So When we talk about investments into Parks and Rec, and maybe it seems high, it's a little higher because we're playing catch-up, and then it's higher because we're trying to add another layer to that. So what I will say as far as cost is concerned, the ARPA funds was a huge help. I mean, $8 million coming into our department alone just with that to get these projects up and going, and then another 2.16 this year alone, $1 million of grant funding. So out of roughly 12, 13 million, 10 million, over 10 million is coming out of free money, more or less.
Thank you very much, Mike. Appreciate
Sure.
it.
You bet.
Councilmember Jackson.
Thank you, Mike. Just a couple of questions. Do we have stats on who uses our parks? Like, is it primarily Farmers Branch residents, or is there a large percentage of people that use our parks that don't live in Farmers Branch?
It's a great question. So what we track with stat-wise and resident, non-resident is those that enter into our special events, which is not parks, but we found a 50-50 split on a lot of special events. Now, we did an exercise a couple of years ago where we had board members and staff go out to each of our parks, all different days and times of the week, and track usage on there. Now, the ones that didn't run from us, we got stats from, right?
Right.
Tried to send the most friendly faces. And what we determined at that point is not necessarily a correlation to residents, non-residents. And we thought, hey, if a park is in the middle of a residential community, would it be used more? What we determined is when we upped the level of the park, it drew people in. And so there was really no correlation with that. In fact, I'd say one of our worst playgrounds and parks is over by Farmers Branch Park that had the highest usage because of you have a school and you have tournaments that are going nonstop. And so brother and sister come over and play. So we don't have any current stats as far as residents, non-residents are concerned, but we can certainly do that exercise again when the weather's a little bit better.
Okay, very good. So in thinking about all of these projects, and I had some of the same thoughts that Mr. Mayor had about the cost of new parks, the cost of ongoing maintenance, and are we going to be here again? You just mentioned that your department has an influx of a lot of resources. Was it $12 million, $12 million from ARPA, and now potentially this. How much of your department how will your department be impacted by managing all of these projects? Because it seems like a pretty big bite to chew.
Yes, and that's a great question. I'm glad you asked that. Yeah, it is large. So I've been doing this almost 20 years at this point in Parks and Rec. This is the most I've ever seen any department take on at one point in time. Now, the good thing is it's the best team I've ever worked with before. We have Kerry Phillips in the back, who's been around 32-ish years. 34, a long time. He still looks young. He started when he was a baby. He's great at creating leaders and managing this stuff, but we are getting stretched pretty thin at this point. So at some point when we add amenities and have to continue to increase maintenance on these, we will have to add staff. Now, we are very creative and resourceful, and so one of the things that we're doing is using more contract labor to offset some mowing tasks, and the staff that are more skilled on a trade that would cost us more, we're using to do that rather than contracting out. But I'd say at this point, anything additional that we're going to add, we're going to have to look at some staff probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. And then last question, if you could go back to the slide where you have the neighborhood improvements listed out. Is there a, excuse me, is there a dollar amount that's associated with this, or is this just something we want to be sure and include in the overall?
So I just earmarked $2 million in there, and that's going to be dictated by what on here you'd like to do and to what level. So I know Mark Bentley's got something for you a little bit later that will talk about some medians and what that'll cost, and those aren't cheap to add new enhanced medians. Now, once they're there, you can plant foliage and make it look a heck of a lot better, which once the weather turns a little bit more favorable, you'll see in some certain parts of the city that we're just going to do in our department. But this will be dictated what kind of lights you want, where you want, if you want them at all, new medians or just enhanced medians, traffic calming. So I'll leave that for you all to decide. But I earmarked $2 million in that budget slide. Okay. So
thank you very much.
You bet.
Councilmember Williams.
Hey, Mike. Thank you so much for the presentation. Talking to residents over the past month or so, and kind of watching the economic trends heading the way that they are, I think that there's an overall nervousness from residents that I think that might impact whether or not we can actually get this bond passed in November, as we're heading into what is probably going to be a recession. The idea of trying, I don't want to set us up for failure is what I'm saying. And I don't want us to only have a 50-50 shot of getting a bond passed. And the feeling that I'm kind of getting is that that's what we're looking at.
Yeah.
So with that being said, I think that there's some ways that we can look at these projects that maybe we don't put in the bond, but that we can still keep on keep it on the table with some other partnerships. And one of the ones that I was looking at, and that I've kind of talked to staff about, is the Park at the Branch connection, because I know that we had talked about a possibility of a senior residents moving in there, and that might be something that we could look at passing together and looking at partnership with. And I think that may be one of those items that we can start to pare back so that we have a better buy-in. The other thing that we might want to look at is the Trex Pathway. I know when we talked about that in strategic planning, that we had looked at maybe that was really important to us in order to maintain that feel of that being a nature preserve. But maybe that's something that we could stage out for a future item as well. I'm always gonna support whatever you guys know better than what we do. You definitely know better in that department than what I do. But I don't want to set us up for something that's going to be a hard sell, because we're walking into a recession and people are going to look at extravagant spending on top of ARPA money spending and be like, we've got all these parks going in and all of us are struggling to buy groceries. So those are just my 2 cents.
Cool. Thank you. Councilman Roman.
So I share the same sentiments as the other council members, that I think it's not the right time. I think we can take advantage of the comprehensive plan conversation that is coming up. I know that we're gearing up for a ton of interaction with residents and feedback from them. And I think we can really take that feedback and really refine this bond if this is what the council ends up deciding on doing. And I think we can continue the conversation. So maybe it's not, no, let's get rid of this completely, but let's just maybe talk about it at a later time. And through the conversations with residents and the comprehensive plan process, we can figure out, is this what people actually want? Are they supportive of it? And I think that just would be a better way of approaching it. I think it will set you guys up for a little bit more success. I know that we have a really short runway to be able to move forward. So for those reasons, it sounds like what I'm hearing is what I was going to share, which is that I think we need to X the bond discussion, at least for now.
All right. One more. Any more, and I'm shutting you down.
Thank you. So I'm always in favor of having the voters make the decision here, right? But is there a cost involved in us getting to, the bond election? What have we spent? There's marketing material, there's meetings, and there's resources on staff, and there's the procedure itself. But if we go to the bond election in November and we lose, what have we spent to lose?
So I'll let John answer that, yeah.
We don't know exactly on the marketing cost. There will be some, but to call a special election in November, we don't have anything else on. It's been estimated from Dallas County to be about $40,000.
Another consideration is if you call for the election and election is not successful, you also have certain debt issuance costs that you incur, rating agencies, things like that, that you do have to pay. Those can be in the, $20,000 to $40,000 cost. So we would want to understand if we believe we're going to be successful with it to avoid having those sorts of costs as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Perfect.
Thank you. All right. Mr. Mashburn, thank you very much.
Sure.
Next is A5, receive a report on FBTX Connect Citizen Engagement app. Welcome back, Mr. Bonanno. Glad you were here this time.
Thank you for having me back. Leo Bonanno, Deputy Director of Neighborhood Services. I've been asked to brief you all on the status of FBTX Connect, the city's citizen engagement app that was put in place sort of unofficially in September, October of 2001, mainly for testing and setup, and then it really kicked in January of this year. And so we're going to go over just a bit of the data, and there are a lot of numbers coming up, but I promise I won't read them all to you. And the department heads are here to answer questions about their data if you have any when we're done. So feel free to ask us. So in October 1 of 2021, FBTX Connect was officially released. Right off the bat, we had over about 1,500 people download the app and start using it. And from October to December, that was staff's opportunity to get comfortable using the app, testing it, and also the public. And then we moved on. I did this same presentation in, I believe, December of last year, and I reported on just how that testing was going. And so this presentation covers the first 6 months of this calendar year, now that things are really rolling. These are currently the departments that are on the app. And that all this data is included in this presentation. There's some more information at the end of the presentation about departments that are coming online and our plans to do that. But for right now, these are the folks that are accessible through the app. So if you look at all of those departments as a group, this is the data we come up with. As a team, every department engaging through the app, we received over 1,100 requests through the app, and so far have closed 1,152 of them, meaning some of them were open between June 30th and July 1st, the cutoff date. Our average time to acknowledge requests, that's actually sending a message back to the citizen, letting them know we received your request and we're dealing with it or we're looking into it. That's now less than a day, down from a day last time I gave this presentation. The average time to close a request has also dropped from 2.8 days down to 2.6. We're going to talk a little bit more about closing requests and what that means, because it means different things to different departments. So I'll go into a little bit of that with you. You'll also see this term a lot, SLA. That is a service level agreement. In the software, each department gets to determine an SLA for each issue we might receive from the public. And it's a number of days, and the goal is for every department to choose a number of days that is reasonable to address that issue. So in the case of, for example, code enforcement, a lot of our issues tend to be addressed within 2 to 3 days. We receive a complaint about tall grass at somebody's property. We acknowledge the complaint. We go out and inspect the property. We update the complainant as to the results. And then we close the complaint and work the case in our software. That is our SLA, that time frame that I've given our officers. Well, every department head has established their own SLAs for each issue that they address. So you'll see that quite a bit in the presentation. So overall, as a team, we met our goals, the goals that we established. We met them 89% of the time, up from 80%. which means, to me, that folks are getting better at using the app, but also better at designing SLAs for themselves. Giving yourself one day to solve a problem that would take 4 days to solve isn't appropriate. And so from the testing phase to now, departments have learned how to adjust their SLAs to be more reasonable, which is a good thing. So code enforcement, we kind of dominate the app, which was expected. And this is a breakdown of every type of complaint that we received through the app in these 6 months and how we did in each category. And also that one on the right, the miscellaneous code issues, that is no different than any of the others, but the table was so big I ran out of space. So it's the same as the others. But this is an example, and I can show you how SLAs are established. If you look down at, for example, junk and inoperable vehicles, which you can see here. Well, we had 27 complaints or requests reporting junk or inoperable vehicles. Well, I established an SLA for our code officers of 3 days. Within 3 days, you should be able to inspect the vehicle, determine if it's inoperable or not, which is a little bit extra, and then report back to the complainant and shut it down. Well, if you look at the apartment complaints SLA, that is up to 10. And some folks might ask why. Well, when we receive a complaint about an apartment, my landlord won't fix my air conditioner. Okay? Well, we cannot go into the house and address that until the tenant is home to let us in. So expecting to have that done in 3 days is not reasonable, because what we tend to hear the most is, well, I'm not off this week, can we do it next week? So a larger SLA is more reasonable for some categories of problems than others. So you'll also see there's a 10 down there for zoning and land use. Zoning and land use issues take a lot of research. We have to pull plats and all sorts of things. So that's why that SLA is so big, just the sheer research to determine if someone's complaint is valid. So that's how SLAs are working. Now, if you take all of that data and put it together, this is what you come up with for code enforcement for the last 6 months. We received 566 complaints. We closed them. We are acknowledging people in less than a day. We are closing most of our issues in 2 days. And we are hitting the mark on our SLAs 93% of the time. So a figure like this tells me that our SLAs are appropriately established. If I saw this dip below 90%, I might do some tweaking, because I don't like any numbers below 90%, regardless of the situation. So. Animal services, also part of neighborhood services. Now, animal services has an interesting situation. From January to June, there were only 2 categories in the app. If you wanted to file an animal complaint, your only choices were a deceased animal and other. That was it. So out of, I believe it ended up being 40 total, there were a lot of others. And I don't like others because you can't track them. There's no way to tell which ones did well and which ones didn't. So when I prepared this presentation for you, I assumed that you would also feel the same way I did. So I went into the others and started breaking them out so that you'd have a better idea of what's actually coming in. So I knew that coyote sightings was an issue we talked about previously, and so I wanted to highlight those. Loose pets, barking dogs are some of the bigger issues. So now, when a member of the public uses the app, all of those are available to them. But we just don't have data for you today because it only started in July. So the SLA rate for animal services, as you can see over there, is 62.71%. The reason that happened, if you're curious, is if you look in the SLA column, they have their SLAs set for 1 day. And in my opinion, no department should have anything set for 1 day. So since looking at the data and chatting with the animal services manager, Sarah, who you all know, we determined that obviously 1 day is not appropriate. I applaud their gumption, but when you're a manager, you don't know what you're walking into. You don't know what your staff situation is that day. The complaints can be, wild, especially if you look at loose pets. I mean, an average time frame of almost 9 days to deal with a loose pet, a pet at large. Well, obviously 1 day is not an appropriate goal to set for yourself. You're just kind of setting yourself up for failure. So the new SLAs moving forward, starting in July, have been established, and we're going to see how they do with more reasonable SLAs. But they are doing well. They are getting the work done. It's just that they had some inappropriate SLAs, so we're fixing that. And here are the animal control numbers too. They're doing a good job acknowledging their requests. It's only taking a half a day. They're doing a pretty good job closing their requests between 2 and 3 days. And so again, looking back at the data, they're hitting their mark about 65% of the time. We're going to get that up to code enforcement level, 93% or so, by again adjusting SLAs and also adjusting some of their procedures. So I expect next time that animal services numbers will be a bit higher. The other thing I'll go through with you is the police's data. The police department has been in the testing phase of the app since February. The police have a unique situation. They already have software to track complaints that come in. However, that doesn't stop people from using the app to complain about police-related issues. So we have to put them somewhere. And again, I'm not a fan of other because it doesn't explain anything to you. So we created a category for the police department that only staff can see. The public cannot report things to the police directly through the app. The reason for that is we don't want the citizens to use the app to report emergencies. The app is not watched 24 hours a day. If you have a 911 situation, you need to call 911. You do not use the app. So the public are unable to access the police through the app in this way. However, they do report various things that are police issues. For example, noise. Noise is a police issue. When those come in, they come to me, and then I assign them to the police department. And so that's the data you're seeing here, is how are they doing after they're receiving them from me. And you can see they're doing fantastically. They are closing every one of their issues in less than a day. I work with Jay Siegel, and Jay is amazing and works very hard, monitors my stuff from the app constantly, responds to people almost immediately. So Jay Siegel and his team have a lot to do with these great numbers. Since they were in the testing phase, we never set up SLAs for them. We didn't know what was reasonable until we tested it out. Now that we see they're getting things done in under a day, an appropriate SLA is probably about 2 days. So what we'll do is wrap up testing. I'll have a conversation or two with the chief to make sure that everything's appropriate for them. What we don't want to do is duplicate work. Since they have a system already for complaints, we don't want to duplicate work for them. So I'll work all of that out with Deputy Siegel and Chief Hale, and then assuming everybody's happy, then they'll go live. And then this data will fill up the next time I see you, okay? So your other, and here's the police. Police have gotten an even 50, and again, they're hitting it out of the park, getting things done in less than a day, on average less than half a day, okay? Every other department is listed here. I won't go into other departments' data because they're here to explain it if you need it. I do want to talk about parks because parks brings up an interesting discussion. What you all need to understand is that as you look at this data between departments, this is not apples to apples, okay? Each department stands on its own, and here's why. In code enforcement, for example, we receive a complaint, we investigate it, we report the results, and then we close the complaint and work the case in our case management software. We wouldn't leave our complaint open because our cases can run for months. I have a case right now that's been open for 8 months. But we obviously wouldn't leave it here. It'll just clutter things up. It'll ruin maps. It'll ruin other tools. So that's why we shut ours down and work in another software. The Parks Department does things a little differently. They use the app as a kind of work order system. When they receive a complaint, for example, a fountain at a park is broken, they actually keep track of the steps as they proceed. So we've inspected the fountain, we've confirmed it's broken, we've ordered the part, we got the part, we've installed the part, thank you for letting us know. They keep the citizens engaged through the whole process and then close it down. Well, their SLAs are giving them enough time to do that. And so they've obviously set their stuff pretty good because they're hitting it out of the park too. But my point here is when you look at the different departments, do not compare us to each other because we are each running our own show and it's not apples to apples, okay? So outside of that, you have parks data, you have public works data who's also doing well, sustainability is doing well and there's their data. And finally, moving forward. So here are our plans moving on from here. I'm going to work with the police department to finalize their adoption on the app. Again, the public will still not be able to interact with them directly for reasons I've stated, but we want to start putting in SLAs and getting data for them. Community services is about to come onto the app. We do get requests on community service related things, permitting questions and things like that. Does this need a permit? Does that need a permit? How many inches does blah, blah, blah? Well, those are all technical questions that a building inspector should be answering. So we're going to get community services set up and they're going to start testing. And we'll see how that goes. I'm sure they'll do fine. My plan is to reduce the number of other requests. If you take the city as a whole, the team as a whole, we get a lot. And so, you know, if code enforcement gets 100 other complaints, but 40 of them are all for, you know, fence issues, well, then you should have a category for that. That's a lot. So the plan is to reduce the amount of bland others and get things tracking, get more things tracking. So I plan on looking at that as we proceed. Also, we want to make sure, again, that departments and divisions like the police department, like community services, who are starting to come, that their SLAs are assigned appropriately. And that itself takes testing. What's an appropriate amount of time to do this? Sometimes that's a testing question. So I'll help them through that. And again, we'll see how it goes next time I report all this. So, any questions on that? And again, the other departments are here if you have questions on their data.
Councilmember Roman.
Thank you for your report. I do have some questions. I noticed that you mentioned that there were going to be some more departments that were going to be on the app. Could you remind me what those are?
Sure. The police department is already on it, but they're testing, so they're gonna become official. And community services will be entering the testing phase.
Okay. And then out of the data that was presented on here, was any data omitted? You know, there was for some reason, maybe there was an error, someone mistakenly submitted something, or was any of the information modified? Okay.
No, all the data that you see came right out of the app. The reporting's really, really robust, so we just run reports, and that's what you got today.
Okay, cool. Let's see. Is there an area that you've seen just based off of the app that has experienced more activity in terms of just usage in the app? Like there's a certain area maybe that has a significant number of concerns that have been reported on the app across multiple departments?
I guess across multiple departments, I guess I couldn't answer that. I'll be honest, I focus on mine. So that would be code and animal services. In order to answer your question, I'd have to go back and look at the others, which I've honestly not done.
What about yours and animal?
Yeah, the code complaints, I would say probably a majority of them are in the center of town. Now, I want to make this clear, just because you've received a complaint does not mean it's valid. So we received hundreds of complaints. A, that doesn't mean it's valid, and B, several people may have complained about the same issue. So 500 complaints does not mean 500 violations. That is not the case. But if you take that into account, it still seems to be the more congested part of town. We all know about some of the parking issues in the Wasena area. That's always been an issue, at least since I've been here. So we do get a lot of parking over the sidewalk and things like that. So if I had to say, based on my review of my own data, it tends to be in that area. Animal services is more widespread. There are animals all over town. They have the same issues. Some of them get away. So, you know what I mean? So animal services is a little bit more spread out.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, when you close something on the app, that doesn't necessarily mean that the problem has been addressed. That just means it's been transferred to your case management software?
Yes.
Because one of the concerns or complaints that I get from people is, well, I submitted it, they closed it, and nothing's been done. So then they submit it again, and then it gets closed. And then they're like, it's not done, so they'll submit it, and it's just this perpetual cycle. So I don't know if there's a solution there, or anything that we might be able to do so that people have assurance that it is being worked on. I'm trying to remember, I used the app in Garland years ago, and they did leave it open until something was addressed. Now I understand that thinking about it in the future, you're going to have tons of open things because some things fall out of your control. So I don't know what the solution is, but maybe if you can help me find a solution to make sure that residents feel like their concern has been heard and it is being worked on, because that is the number one complaint that I get about the app.
What we do now, for those who don't know, is when code enforcement officers inspect the property and make a determination, their answer is given to the complainant. So it says, we found a problem, we're working on it, thank you for letting us know. We're going to close this now, but we are working on it. It says that. And it actually outlines the steps we take. This process could take X days, because of these circumstances. So we try to warn people, if you're expecting something to be fixed in a day or two, well, that's probably not going to happen because we have legal hoops we have to jump through. The code enforcement department does. I mean, most of us do that are in enforcement. So, legally, we only have to give 7 days to address somebody's grass. Legally, we have to give 15 days to deal with a junk vehicle, and then we have to schedule a hearing with the court. That could take another 15 days, so now we're out to 30. So I totally understand, folks looking across the street and thinking, why is that still there? I totally understand that. But you folks could help us by explaining whenever it's possible, listen, there are legal things at play. We just can't, the law says I just can't write a citation in some situations. I just can't haul a car away. There are legal hoops we have to jump through, or else you can be accused of taking and all sorts of things. So I totally understand why folks think that. But I would ask anyone listening today to just understand that just because you ran something through the app doesn't mean we get to skip all the legal stuff. So, but yes, we could, for example, tweak the messages. The response messages to maybe we should have a different message for junk vehicles because the vehicle process takes longer than the grass process. So yeah, we can totally look at that.
And then do other departments have a similar process where they close it out and then it goes to a different software for them to manage the completion of it?
I know Animal Services does. They have their own case management software. I do not know how, maybe Deputy Chief Siegel mentioned the police department does have case management, investigation management software, but I don't know about the others. I would ask them today if that's something you want to know.
Yeah, I'm just trying to make sure, what I'm trying to figure out is the way you the messaging of closing a case consistent, is it a consistent definition across all departments? Or is it, for some departments, it's going to stay open until that issue has been addressed? Because then I can see a resident coming by and saying, well, I submitted a complaint for this, and it was closed when it was done, but then I submitted a complaint for this, and said it was closed, but it wasn't done.
Yes, and that is not consistent for the reasons I said, that some departments are using it in different ways, apples to oranges. So we're each using it in the way that we think is best to serve everyone. But the scenario you're describing makes perfect sense. But the answer is no, it's not consistent because we all have different functions to perform.
I see.
So each department head gets to decide how they think the app is best used for their office.
Yeah, maybe at some point, once we've gotten all the departments on there, we can work on that solution.
Sure.
Just because I can see there being confusion with residents. And then I also had a question about Public Works, the water meter concern. I noticed that the SLA success rate was 71%, so I was interested in trying to figure out why that was.
I don't see Mr. Bentley here. I'm sorry, I can't answer that for you. We can get that answer for you and send it, but I'm sorry, I don't know.
Yeah.
Off the top, I don't know at all. Those all get shifted to his office.
Okay, and then the other question I had was regarding sustainability. I noticed that bulk brush pickup was at 72%, and I wasn't sure if that had anything to do with the recent storm, so I just wanted to understand what happened there.
Yes, the storm did us no favors. Guys didn't take time during the week to try and go back and figure out which ones they picked up. And so a lot of the complaints were really driven by folks on the south side of Valley View where there was no impact from the storm. And so as you all know, it took us about 3 weeks to get through the entire town once. So yeah, the storm, we didn't think about an SLA in terms of a storm happening. So that is a large part of the issue with those.
Okay, thank you.
And the issue you brought up before about, we've had one issue in our department where we said something was picked up and was not. So staff was reminded to make sure before you close something out, the job was actually done.
Okay.
And so I can vouch that our staff has incorrectly closed out a case when it should not have.
Okay, I
But
see.
we just keep working with staff to make sure, don't close it unless you know it's done, so.
Fantastic, thank you. And then, I guess I'll just wait to hear from somebody on the Public Works question.
Sure, I'll make a note.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any other questions.
Okay, thanks. Does anyone else have any questions at this time? Mr. Jackson.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Leo. So this app is a really good mechanism for connecting the community with the city and reporting problems and issues, and then for you and the management that are part of the app departments for sort of managing their folks in time closing cases, right?
Yes.
But it doesn't really indicate whether, like you said earlier, a complaint was valid or invalid. You might tell the resident that. It doesn't indicate that there were 3 or 4 people that phoned in or reported the same thing on the, I've never used the app, so I don't know how it works exactly, but so perhaps just sort of in line with what Councilman Roman was saying, there's maybe a valid, invalid indicator that could be added to the criteria. And then the other thing that the app does not report, and maybe it's not for this purpose, maybe we get this in some other report, but how long did it take for a complaint to be verified back into compliance? A valid complaint back into compliance. Is that something you report to us separately, or is that?
We report it every month to the city manager's office. It's not used through, that comes out of our case management software, not here. So we do report those numbers every month, and yes, but just it's not an app tool. It's our case management software does that reporting for us.
Right. Okay. I'm just curious, how good are our residents at following through with, meeting the requirements, and then how good is the staff in following up with ensuring that the requirements are met? I think that's a fair data point.
Sure.
For council to know. And then the last thing is the police part. Is there something in the app that says You know, if I'm going to put in the app, there's a loud party next door at 1 a.m. in the morning, is there something in the app that says, is this an emergency, yes or no? And if you hit yes, then it says, call 911. That's what you should do, right, in emergencies.
If I'm not mistaken, whenever a complaint gets referred to the police department's part of the app, the automatic message is, if this is an emergency, call 911. The app is not monitored 24 hours a day. I recall seeing that, if I'm not mistaken. Do you recall? Yeah, I'm pretty sure we set that up at the beginning.
Okay.
So, yeah, so it does say that.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay, that's where I was getting to, because you had said that if something comes through, then you've got to assign it to the police department. If that's a party at 1 a.m. in the morning,
Yeah,
unless you don't sleep, they're not.
Right.
The party's gone before.
right. Unless I'm at the party, there's nothing I can do.
Yeah. Okay, very good. Just some thinking on that piece of it that might help us kind of sharpen our pencil a little bit. Thank you, Leo.
Sure.
Councilmember Merritt?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Leo, for entertaining my request again to put this information in front of us. I think there's a lot of information, and Richard, you should download the app.
I've got it, I've just not used it.
Well, you should. You've driven the city and you didn't see one thing that you might want to report? That would be interesting. You'd be surprised. I think the app does its work in so much as communicating issues and getting them from the residents to the right staff. And I want to commend you in trying to be the pivot point for a number of the other businesses under the city's umbrella. And I want to make sure that as we onboard other departments, that we're working through that and people understand that you are the pivot point, the fulcrum, if you will, of making sure that those other departments get that. And so the key here in my mind is making sure that we have the categories correct, and you've emphasized that through your presentation here today, that you're augmenting additional categories for people to utilize, and I think that's fantastic. One of the things that I was really hoping to see here, you talked about some next steps in onboarding. Were there really some lessons learned beyond adding more categories that were problematic in working with this? Was it the tool? I'm looking over to Mark. Perhaps there were some limitations to the tool. We do know that handing off in the code enforcement, you have to hand it off to your other system. I think I know, Richard, from my perspective, using the tool, that it does state, as Leo said, all the information about they're closing it, it's moving to another system. They provide all the dates and durations for expectations for that. I think where perhaps some of my peers up here are looking for is perhaps a mechanism that would create a closed loop, if you will. If it goes into your case management system, there's no real notification back to tie these two together. Now I'm doing vaporware, and that means I'm, blue skying this, not producing a solution. But I think that's the sort of message that we're seeing here. We've got 1,200 roughly requests over the course of 8 or 9 months. People are using it. We're seeing people being more engaged in the community. But I want to make sure that people understand that the staff is responding to those, and we see that here through your numbers today. The staff is replying to all of those issues in whatever bucket they are. So again, are there any other lessons learned? And I think you and I had a conversation, I know we had a conversation, that you have a few things that you'd like to perhaps introduce to this, and so maybe giving you a little bit of green space to jump onto that conversation.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the things we did learn, and this might be a complaint that any of you could hear, is, I reported something. I called in and reported something, and when complaints are called in or emailed into our office, they all go in the app. And so our admin puts them in the app. Well, one of the complaints I've heard is, I called, and you can see active items on the app, and I called and I don't see my complaint. Your girl didn't do it. she ignored us, or this. I've heard that several times. And I know that's not true. I hear my admin on the phone all day, every day, and I know she's working. So what's happening there? Well, what we discovered is after a complaint on the app is closed for 7 days without activity, it then switches automatically to an archived status. And then it is not visible to the public anymore, although it is visible to us. So folks would call and complain, and I'd say, well, I can see it. I'm looking right at it. And they would say, well, we can't see it. And that might result in additional complaints as well. And so, again, what we've learned, unfortunately, is that is not changeable. That is system-wide. It's not something that we can alter. We can't up the 7 days to something else. So that's one of those things. We learned a lesson from that, but we also learned that this is one of those things that's out of our control. So at least we know how to explain it now. At least we know what's happening. But I agree with you. I mean, at this point, you know, what's the result of my complaint? I filed a complaint. What happened? The answer I have at this moment is look at the house you complained at. And if the lawn was mowed, if the car is gone, that most likely was us. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes things happen. The timing is just right. But if you want to know how your situation ended, look at the house that you reported to us. I know it seems kind of flippant, but I don't mean it that way. So yes, there are some features that I wish were there. I think Mr. Jackson's suggestion about tagging things as, yes, this was valid, no, this was not valid, I think that's a valid feature I wish was there. I just don't, I think we can give feedback to the company. They have updated it several times, at least 3 times since we've had it. So I think we can give feedback to the company, and they make improvements like every other app developer, but we don't have any control ultimately over what they give us. We bought a product and this is what it does, you know, so.
And I know in my experience with the tool, if there is a case of non-compliance, it's noted, and obviously we've talked about how that goes into case management, but if there is no issue, it's compliant, that's stated by the officer, that nothing was observed out of the ordinary or visually as an issue that would make its way. So I know that your staff is entering that communication back. So the onus is somewhat on the individuals to make sure that they look at the app and understand that they're communicating back to the app with the addresses that they have placed in there. And if you haven't placed one, you're not going to be able to get a return notification as well. So the one thing that I might suggest here, based on what I've heard and based on the augmentation of new departments, is perhaps putting the SLA in the category statement some way, shape, or form, if that's possible. If, you know, someone knows that they're putting in an issue, it's 3 days in one area, 7 days in another, 10 days in another. It helps you communicate duration and manage expectations.
Sure, that's a great idea.
But again, thank you very much to you and your team and, you know, the technical folks behind the scenes putting this in. I think it's a great resource, and if you don't have it, FBT Text Connect, it's available on your iPhone or Android device, and it's very easy to use. So thank you very much, Leo.
Sure.
All right. Leo, thank you.
Thank you.
Next is discuss. Mr. Bentley is backing up his truck as we speak, so if we still have a pending question for him, give him a few minutes to walk in. We can go through the next agenda item. Let's come back to that question.
Okay. Discuss future agenda items. Councilmember Merritt.
Our plate is full with already known issues related to redistricting. We know we have our meeting next Tuesday on redistricting. Obviously, there's a lot of work under the comprehensive planning going on, so we look forward to some opportunities there. And of course, we have our budget cycle coming forward and the updates on the city manager search as well. So all those things are already known, so I don't have anything really new to add to that.
Okay. Councilmember Jackson.
So you're going to make me feel bad because I'm going to add a couple of items. Mayor, I think it'd be good for us to have a discussion about the front yard fence ordinance. It came up recently, and we've got a number of large properties throughout Farmers Branch that, like one case, they'd like to add wrought iron or something. So I think it warrants us reviewing that and seeing if an update would be appropriate to allow some type of structure for certain properties. And then the second thing would be, I'd also like to see council in a discussion regarding to enhance our code of ethics with a provision that prohibits sitting council members and the mayor from making a public endorsement of a Farmers Branch candidate for elected office.
Okay.
That's all. Thank you.
Nothing for me, Mayor.
All right. Councilmember Roman?
Thank you, Mayor. I just had one thing that I'd like to discuss in the future, and it's regarding garage sales. It's come up a few times. It's been brought up to my attention multiple times, and I just want to make sure we're setting reasonable expectations as to how many garage sales people can have per year, and then have a way to be able to keep track of how many garage sales people are having, whether it be a permit or otherwise.
Okay. All right. Mr. Bentley? A question has been asked of you. Councilmember Roman?
Hi, Mr. Bentley. I just had one question. We were just having the presentation about the FBTX Connect app, and I just was curious about the water meter concern. It looks like the SLA success rate was at 71%, so I was curious to understand what happened there.
Which one is it? Water meter success is what he's asking about. The average. I don't understand what the 71%, because generally speaking, we do clear those out within 2 days. Our average is 1.4. So I'm not sure where the 71% came from. We usually clear out every water meter concern that we have. Now, granted, some of the things we can't clear out because we end up telling the homeowner that it's not on our side, it's on their side. And at that point, I don't know if that has some effect on exactly the way it's being noted for the 71%.
I see. Leo, can you?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure how that particular item is worded and how that 71% comes up, the success rate, because generally we clear out everything in 1.4.
I mean, everything in the system is averaged, and some of the averages are even weighted. So on average, Mr. Bentley's team is closing these out in 1.4 days. Well, it's totally possible that they go out and see an incident that can't be addressed in 2 or 3 days, and they have to come back, or they don't have the equipment they need. So it's possible that on a number of occasions they exceeded their 2-day SLA to the point where it pulled the average down. You know what I mean? Yeah. So if I had to guess, that's what's happening. Is a few incidences dragged he only has 17 requests. Mm-hmm. The more requests you have, the less damage happens when you are late on 1 or 2, right? In code enforcement, we have hundreds of requests. So if we miss 1 or 2, it doesn't ding us quite so hard. But when you have 17 requests and perhaps 2 or 3 got away from you, now it's hitting your SLA success rate like a cannonball. Mm-hmm. It's just blowing you out of the water. So if I had to guess, 1 or 2 incidents pulled your average down.
Well, and this could have been one of the issues too. We had personnel change. We had people leave, and then we had a vacant spot for a long period of time. Well, a lot of these concerns went to that email address, and we never picked it up until late. We figured out what was happening, where they were going, and we got that fixed. So that could have had an effect where some of those were in that period of time that we were not getting the messages and not taking care of it. And that's the only thing I can think of, because generally speaking, we clear out our things within a day and a half.
Sure.
And if we don't, if it's the way we look at it, if it's a concern that we know and we noted, and it's on our work order, we clear it out because it's on our work list and we're going to take care of it. So we already know about it. So it's been taken care of. So I don't see how, I guess it's just an anomaly
Sure.
in the system.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. All right, we'll break for dinner and come back for our regular meeting. The time is 5:18. Thank you.